new series called 10 Laws That Bring Life. 10 Laws That Bring Life. I want to recommend a book to you I read this summer. It's called The Tender Commandments by Pastor Ron Mehl, M-E-H-L. If you've never read that book, you can still get it on Amazon, The Tender Commandments. And as I read that book, it really got me fired up about the 10 Commandments because he talked about the 10 Commandments not as a list of burdensome rules and not as a guilt-inducing document, but he talked about the 10 Commandments as statements from the heart of a father to his children, statements of love to the Father's children. And that's how I see the 10 Commandments now, like I never did before. So I want to talk to you about 10 laws that bring life. Now, some of you may be thinking, oh, great. I can almost hear you now. Oh, great. We're going to spend the next 10 weeks talking about how bad I am and how I've messed this one and that one and the other one up, and I'm really sick of this. I think I'll just check out for the next 9 weeks because we're just going to hear another law every week, and we're going to hear about how bad we're doing, and we're going to try to do better, and we're going to fail miserably and come back feeling more guilty the next week, so let's just skip all of this. I have people sometimes ask me, why do we need the rules in the first place? Why do we need laws? To give you a quick Old Testament in a nutshell, here it is. God created man. He put us in a beautiful garden, and He only gave one commandment, just one. Can you imagine that if life only had one rule? You would think it would be easy. You would think we could have knocked that one out of the park. Just one rule, one thing thou shalt not do was eat from that tree over there. And of course, we went straight for it. We broke God's law. Well, we continued to struggle. Society continued to go downhill. God sent a flood. Noah was saved. God kind of hit the reset button a little bit, some people think. And so Noah comes out and begins to try to live for God. Noah barely gets off the ark before sin starts right back up again. Go on down and you go through Abraham. You go to Moses. Any of you ever seen Moses? He looks just like Charlton Heston. And he's carrying these big tablets of stone, and on those are written, God actually wrote the 10 Commandments. Moses was the one to whom God gave the law, and he gave a lot of laws, and for the rest of the Old Testament, the nation of Israel, by the way, Israel had been selected by God to be His people on earth. They'd been selected by God to lead this earth, to show this earth the heart of the Father and how to live for God. For the rest of the Old Testament, Israel struggled again and again to keep all these rules that God handed down. Now, I want to tell you something this morning. The rules do us a great favor. The law does us a great favor. The first thing that the law does is tell us that we have a Father in heaven who loves us, who wants to protect us, and who has a much better life for us than we can live by ourselves. The law outlines God's standards of how we're to behave. Now, here's the struggle with the law. One of the things the rules do, and the law does and did, is tell us again and again that by ourselves we can't live up to God's standards. Have you ever tried to do that? Have you ever tried to read the rules and say, okay, I'm going to keep all of these? That's what some people think Christianity is. That we go to the Bible and we see a rule and think, okay, I'm going to try to live that out this week. And then we conquer that one, supposedly. Then we go on to the next one. And some people really believe this is Christianity. We keep reading the rules and we keep trying harder and we get better at this thing. And before long, after about 65 years, we finally gotten it all and then we die. That's not Christianity. See, Paul writes about this in the New Testament again and again, and he said, here's what the law does. When the rules come down, it makes us want to sin. Anybody know what I'm talking about? How many of you never wanted to break a rule until you knew it was a rule? Anybody know what I'm talking about? How many of you, I hope we can just be real here today, how many of you, as soon as you see a rule, you're ready to break it? Or at least you're ready to see how far you can push it. Heard a pastor talk about one time he had a group of boys in his backyard. He was having a birthday party for his sons, and he watched them all. They were playing all over the yard. They were having fun, and he'd given them all kind of games. Then the pastor came out. He said, I'm going to do a little test. So he called the boys together, and he said, boys, I want to just tell you something. You can play in this whole yard and have fun all over the yard, do anything you want, but I don't allow any spitting in my flower beds. So he went back in the house and he looked out the window. And before long, they're inching over to the flower bed. And before long, they started looking, and he said, I saw them go right in the flower bed. That is an apt description of what the Apostle Paul said. He said, when the commandment came, sin rose up in my life. The law actually pushes us towards sin because of our sinful nature. But here's the way the law helps us, and it helps you today. It makes you realize you can't live this Christian life by yourself, and it points you to Jesus Christ. You see, that's what the Old Testament is all about. The giving of the law, our inability to keep the law, and all through the Old Testament it talks about the one that's coming. And this is the beautiful thing it says about the law. God says the day is going to come when the law will no longer be written on tablets of stone, but it'll be written inside men's hearts. And that's why Jesus came, to write the law inside of us so that we don't have to look at a book and say, now I'm going to go out and try to do this and fail time and time and time again. Jesus came to break the power of sin off our lives. See, Jesus is not a self-help coach. Jesus is not someone just giving advice. Jesus Christ, by dying and raising from the dead and going to the Father, literally broke the power of sin for everyone who would believe and receive that into their lives. So today, I don't have to go back to the rule book and say I'm going to try harder. I simply say, Jesus, what do you say? Jesus, live through me. Jesus, I give up. I can't do it. Do what I cannot do. The greatest freedom in my life has come when I just gave up and said, Jesus, I can't handle this. You got to do something. Here I am. Amen. The rules exist to point us to our need for a Savior. Now, some people say this, well, doesn't God seem kind of harsh in the Old Testament? How many of you have ever read the Bible and thought that that must be a different God in the Old Testament as the New Testament? 5 honest people here this morning. We're going to convert the rest of you before it's over. But you read the Bible and it just seems like a different guy. The God in the Old Testament seems like he's mad all the time. And the God in the New Testament seems like he just loves everybody. Same God. Let me illustrate it like this. Have you ever seen a parent being too harsh with a child? I was in Disney World one time, and they say it's the happiest place on earth. They don't tell some people that. Some people in Disney World don't get that memo. I was walking along in Disney World, and I saw this. I saw a child spill his ice cream cone. His ice cream just fell out on the ground. And I saw his dad start to berate him and scream and yell at him for dropping that ice cream cone. I mean, what could it have cost? Well, I started to say 50 cents, but more like $7 at Disney World. But for $7, he was willing to destroy his child's confidence and any trust that child had in him. And he was just yelling at that kid for dropping an ice cream cone. You don't yell at a child for an accident. Do you hear me today? The Bible commands us, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath. Do not engage them in that way. Do not be overly harsh with your family. So that was totally wrong. There was another occasion that was in my life when I had my little bitty girl by the hand in Walmart, and she had barely learned to walk. But she could go. I'm telling you, that girl, as soon as she learned to walk, she was gone. So we were walking out of Walmart in the little exit area, and she got away from me. I had groceries and stuff and a cart or something. She got away from me, and she starts heading for those doors, and the doors open, and I see cars going by. and my little baby's about to walk in front of a car. And I yelled at the top of my lungs, and I was harsh. I wanted to make her cry. I wanted to scare her. I did everything in my power so that everybody in Walmart would know my daughter was about to walk in front of a car. And guess what? She received it very harshly. She cried, but she didn't walk out in front of that car. I was justified in my tone because I was trying to save her life. If sometimes the law of God seems overly harsh to you, understand this. God sees the end of the story when you just see a moment right here. God sees where that decision you're about to make takes you down the road. And oftentimes He sees you're about to destroy your life. Maybe not in that moment, but you're about to get yourself on a path that leads to destruction. This morning in the commandments, we're talking about navigation. I heard Andy Stanley say this the other day, and it was very powerful. He said, what seems to us as to be a momentary pleasure can lead to a permanent pathway. What seems to us to just be something we're indulging in for the moment can put our life on a path that leads to really bad places. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? If you can trace your life back from a really awful place, anybody been to any awful places? Anybody been to any hurtful places? Any of you ever hit rock bottom before? If you could trace that back to where it started, it didn't seem so bad in the moment. But you needed a God who would be straight with you to save you from getting on that path. I want you to keep that in mind over the next several weeks as we talk about these 10 laws and understand if some of these seem harsh, it's the heart of the Father saying, don't walk in front of that car. Amen. Now let's look at the first commandment, the first one today. We're going to tackle this one quickly today. Exodus chapter 20, verses 1 through 3. It says this, then God gave the people all these instructions. I am the Lord your God who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. You must not have any other God but me. I am the Lord your God. I am the one who rescued you from Egypt and from slavery. You must not have any other God but me. I want to talk to you this morning about pointing our lives towards true north, which is God. I want everybody to play a game. You ready to play a game this morning? We're going to have some fun. And I want everybody to play. First service, some of them didn't play and made me mad, so you don't want to do that. You make me mad, I'm going to preach a long time. We got ushers at the door, so we're just going to keep you in here. We're going to play a fun game. Everybody close your eyes really quick. Now, I know some of you are thinking this is the altar call. No, I'm not done yet. This is not the altar call. Close your eyes. Now, I'm going to count to 5, and you've got to be honest about this with no help from anybody. I'm going to count to 5, and when I say 5, I want you to point north. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Point, everybody. Point north. Come on. Come on. Leave your hand. Don't look around. Don't be switching. Leave it there. Now, everybody open your eyes. Stay pointed. Everybody point north. Come on. Keep them up there. Keep them up there. Let's see where you're at. Okay. How many people whipped out your compass really quick on your phone? How many did that? Leave them up, please. Leave them up. Okay, north is right here. Leave them up. How many are pointed back there? Some are pointed straight up. I don't know where that is. Anybody pointing right back here? There's a few of us, right? Pointing south. You do not want to get in a car with these people. These people will get you lost. They don't know where they are. Let me just tell you, I cheated on this. I came in here on Wednesday with the compass and figured out that was north. If I had been in here, I'd have pointed every which way but loose because I'm horrible with directions. I don't know. North is here. Now, for those of you that pointed south, the culture today would tell us not to correct you. Listen to me now. Let's talk a minute. I'm your friend. You're my friend. The culture today would tell us, okay, you want to believe that's south. Bless your heart. That's okay. That can be south for you. It's all right. I don't want to, let me just try to slip in this more. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings now. I think this is north, but if you want to think that's north, then that's your right, and that's okay, and you just go on. You want to get to New York City? Go that way. You want to get to Disney World? Go this way. I'm going to Disney World of those choices. But if I go to Disney World, I'm going down there. If I coddle you and comfort you with your life headed in the wrong direction, now it's one thing to be a jerk with people and think you're better than everybody and think you're the police and the sheriff of the whole world. Some Christians are like that, and that's just wrong. You're not the morality sheriff of the whole world. It is not your job to tell everybody around you how to live. It's your job to point them to Jesus. And you don't do that by having a bad attitude. But with the same thought in mind, it is not loving to let a person wander south believing that it's north without trying to encourage them to see the truth. But in our society today, you can get almost crucified for saying that's north. But there is only one north. If you're lost, you need to find out where north is. Now, there's a good way to do that. Just take out your cell phone, and they have a compass app on it. And before that, though, the way to find north is to find the North Star. Polaris is the North Star. Some people make the mistake of thinking the North Star is the brightest star in the sky. It's not at all the brightest. It's not even close to the brightest star in the sky. But Polaris is the one star that doesn't move from our perspective. It's always in the same spot. In fact, if you look at the North Star, Polaris, all the other stars in the sky from our perspective rotate around that star going counterclockwise. It's very slow, and you can observe it over time, but Polaris stays there. It's north, and all the other stars go around it. So if you're lost on a clear night and you don't have your phone, the best thing you can do is find the North Star. And I'm not going to leave today without helping you do that. We have a graphic today so you can learn something maybe you don't even care about, but here it is. Here's how you find the North Star. There at the bottom is the Big Dipper. Can you see that? Most people can pick out the Big Dipper. If you will find the Big Dipper and go to the pan there of the Big Dipper, trace those two stars on the edge, they will point to Polaris every time. Say, well, doesn't the Big Dipper move? It does. It spins around Polaris, but it turns all night long. It goes in a 360 around it, and the edge of that pan will always point to the North Star. Interestingly enough, Polaris is at the handle at the end of the Little Dipper. So none of you are allowed to get lost again. But let's talk about the North Star. It never moves. It's the one constant when everything else is spinning. Does that sound like something you need to orient yourself with? When the world's spinning around, there's one thing you can look to and know that it's constant, and that's God and His Word. Something to stand on. Do you know by Polaris, all the other stars rotate around it? From our perspective, understand it's not the center of the universe, but here from Earth, all the other stars rotate around it. Everything is measured by its position against the North Star. You know what I learned a long time ago? I should not measure myself against other people. It's very easy for me to think I'm doing well when I look at some people. I don't mean that to be unkind. It's very easy you'll always find somebody that's worse off than you. And you can always find somebody that's struggling worse than you are with any given thing. What I've learned is to stick with God and measure myself against Him. You say that's an impossible standard. Well, it would be, except He sent His Son Jesus to die for us, to live in us, and to live His life through us. It is impossible with man, but it's possible with God. But you see, everything points to the North Star. When God says in His Word, you will have no other gods before me, He's saying, align your life with me. Now, I understand that's a big request of God. That's a big commandment of God. It's more than a request, it's a commandment. He said, you will have no other God but me. How can God possibly ask such a thing? I want to tell you how. First of all, look at verse 1 and 2, what He says. Verse 2, He says, I am the Lord your God. He is a personal God. Do you know He's your God? That He hears your prayers? If you don't know that this morning, you need to know that. God is not an impersonal force. I mean, I like Star Wars, but I'm glad it's not just a force. I'm glad I serve a God that knows my name, knows where I'm at, knows the struggle that I'm in. And He said, you call unto me, and I will answer you, and I'll show you great and mighty things. I had a young man come in first service this morning before church. He told me, he said, I was in this church about, I think it's 1.5 to 2 years ago. He said, I came here and my wife and I were struggling to have a baby. And he said, we sat down right behind a family that had a little newborn baby. And he said, I didn't hear a word you said. I was so jealous. He said, we couldn't have a baby. And some of you who struggle with that, you know what it's like. You want to rejoice at somebody else having a child, but you keep saying, God, why not us? He said, I sat there through that whole message, and he said, I just prayed to God, and I said, God, would you please give us a baby? 2 weeks later, she was pregnant. That's worth rejoicing over. We're going to dedicate that baby next month. Really excited about that. Now, you may be here and you're still struggling with that. Maybe there are things like that. Maybe that very thing that you've asked God for and it's still a struggle. Keep on talking. He cares about you. Keep on asking. He knows far above your ways. His thoughts are above your thoughts. His ways above you. Keep on trusting Him. He is a personal God who hears your prayers. He's also a proven God. You know what He said? He said, not only am I am the Lord your God, He said, I am the Lord your God who rescued you from the land of Egypt, the place of your slavery. God is able to command us to serve Him as God because He's our God, and He's a God who rescued us when we were in sin. I don't know about the rest of you. I think I do, but I can only speak for myself. When I was in sin, I was in bondage. I was in darkness. I was broken, and I knew it, and I wanted to be better, but there was nothing I could do about it because everywhere I went, I took me with me. I ran everywhere, but I kept taking myself along. And I couldn't escape me. Finally, the day came when I gave up and said, Jesus, this whole thing here is a mess. I can't do this anymore. I give up. If you can do something with it, you got me. You know what? That's what He was waiting to hear. He was waiting on me to give up. He was waiting on me to fully trust Him as my Savior instead of trying to save myself. And He rescued me. He broke the power of sin in my life, and I'm so thankful that He did. Heard the story of a young lady. She had a lot of friends, and she would always go to her friend's home, but she would never invite her friends into her home. And she had an aunt, her mother's sister, who continually wondered about it. Finally, she pulled the little girl aside, and the teenage girl, and said, why is it you never, she suspected she knew, but she said, why is it you never invite friends to your house? She said, it's because of Mom's arms. See, her mom had been severely burned in an accident several years prior, and it had left terrible burn scars all up and down the length of her arms. And the teenage girl said, that I'm ashamed of that. It just doesn't look good. It looks gross, and I don't want my friends to see that. And her aunt said, let me tell you something, sweetheart. You don't know about this. But your mom, as a single mom, raising you alone, had you in a single-wide mobile home. And that mobile home caught fire one night, and she was outside. And she battled her way in through the flames and took you out of your crib, held you in her arms, and you didn't even get a scratch. She was burned rescuing you. And those are marks of rescue all over her arms. The only man-made thing in heaven are the nail prints in Jesus' hands and feet, and they are the marks of the one who rescued us. He bought us. He's got the right to say, let me be your one and only God, because I am your God and I rescued you. It gives him the right. Point your life. Align your life toward true north by making the one God your only God. Now, how can you know? Say, Pastor, how do I know if my life is really aligned with God? Aligned with true north in my life? Well, where are you going? Are you making a journey? Is your life getting anywhere? Anybody ever been lost out in the woods? Anybody just been in the woods and you just get lost? They asked Daniel Boone one time if he had ever been lost. He said, I never been lost, but I was a mite disoriented for about a week one time. If you get lost in the woods, here's what people tend to do. You'll walk and you'll think you're headed in a certain direction until you see the same rock 3 times. What we tend to do when we're not aligned with the north is we tend to go in circles. People are like that as well. We tend to live in cycles. When we're not really headed in a direction, we'll come back to the same place again and again. I was once with a group of preachers in Phoenix, Arizona. We flew out there to go to a church conference, and our hotel was on the other side. Anybody from Phoenix here today? Can I see it? Okay. Y'all will laugh at this. I found that to be the hardest place to get around in my life. And people tell me it's simple. We had a map. This is back in the old days when you had a big map you opened up. Anybody remember those maps? Once you open them up, you could never fold them back. And I always thought it's pretty dangerous to give a driver a big piece of paper to open up in the car. I mean, that's a bad deal. Get those maps from AAA or wherever, and open them up. Well, I'm sitting in the back of this van, crowded, and one preacher's driving and another preacher's got the map. This is a dangerous situation right there. So finally, we headed from our hotel to Phoenix First Assembly, and we're driving around, couldn't find it, and we wound up at this little park. It's a bunch of little kiddie parks with slides and swings. We're there at this park. I said, "This is not the church." I said, "Well, this is where the map says we're supposed to be." Well, it's wrong. Finally, we got back on, and we drove around town. We basically just ran into the church by accident. So we said that we got in there again. We let that guy be the map guy on the way back to the hotel. Big mistake. We got in the van and started heading back. We wound right back up at that park again. Finally, by blind luck, we found our hotel. The next day, we got a new map guy. That's what you do. You fire the map guy. We head out to the church, park. I'm a smart aleck by nature. I said, such are some of you, the Bible says. I said, you idiots. I know that shouldn't be said, but that's what I said. I'm just being honest. I said, you can't lead a church. You can't even get us from a church to the hotel. Give me that map. I got in the front seat, headed to the hotel. Park. They took the map from me. I am not lying. One of my friends comes to church here. He doesn't live in the area. He comes by he was in that van. He would tell you, we went to that park twice a day, every day for a week. I don't know if it was the map. I don't know if it was the people reading the map. I tend to suspect that's who it is. We never did get straight from the church to our hotel. This is how bad it was. There was one night when we could see our hotel and still couldn't get there. You talk about lost. But a sure indicator that you're lost is this. You keep going back to the same place you don't want to go. When you keep going back to the same place you don't want to go, You're not aligned with true north. I don't want to hurt your feelings. I don't want to make you feel bad about yourself. But I'm telling you, there's hope today in realigning your life to point north towards God. Because more importantly, with whether your car's aligned, it's whether your heart's aligned. Are you seeking after the one true God, or are you wandering around in circles? The nation of Israel who got this law, they knew how to wander. God took them out of Egypt, took them out of slavery. As He said, go to the promised land. And you know, it was only a few days' journey. They went to the promised land, got right up to the edge and looked in and got scared. They said, oh, we can't do that. So God said, okay, you don't want to enter in? The only place for you to go is back out in the wilderness. Wander. Here's what God will do. He'll lead us up to a promised land, and if we won't go in, we've got to wander in circles. People ask sometimes, why is the Old Testament so long? You ever read through the Old Testament and think, man, I wish the Old Testament was shorter and the New Testament was longer. The Old Testament could have been a lot shorter. There's 39 books in the Old Testament, 27 in the New Testament. I believe, I'm just making stuff up now, but I believe that I believe God probably would have had it for the New Testament to be longer. But the Old Testament was so long because they kept going in circles. Prophet after prophet after prophet, judge after judge after judge. Person after person would rise up and they wouldn't listen. It's an exercise in futility to try to keep the rules. But all through the Old Testament, woven in through it, is pointing to Jesus. The Passover lamb, Jesus. The scarlet cord Rahab hung up in her window to be saved, Jesus. So many Bible stories contain Jesus. So many prophecies say a Messiah is coming. The Old Testament says there's no hope, but one is coming who can give you life. Align with true north by getting all the other gods out. What is an idol? We tend to think of an idol as we build up a golden calf, you know, like they did in the Old Testament. We tend to think these people are so stupid. They built up a golden calf and they worshiped it. That's so stupid, yet you can walk into any restaurant in the United States and see families sitting around doing this. We build up all kind of idols. We make relationships an idol. We make money, success an idol. We make our image. We're going to talk about that when God says no graven image. We're going to talk about how image has become a god to so many. We make all kinds of idols. Let me tell you, pointing your life at anything other than Him leads you to a destination you don't want to go. And it will keep you in the same destinations you don't want to go over and over and over. You know how to get off that? You know how to get off that vicious cycle? Surrender. You can either control, do this with me, control, or you can surrender. What are you with relationships in your life? Control. Had a guy tell me once, he said, I'm working on changing my wife. Counseling over. We just need to pray, brother. God, put a hedge of protection around this brother. I don't know what a hedge is, but it's supposed to protect people. So put a hedge of protection around him because he's going to die. He's trying to change his wife. No. Control. You're trying to control your spouse. You're trying to control your kids. You're trying to control your money. You're trying to control life in general. The answer is not control. The answer is surrender. Not to people. Surrendering all you have into the hands and arms of a loving God. Surrender your relationships to God. Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, right before He was going to be arrested and taken away to be crucified, prayed a prayer that I want to pray in every area of my life and say, Father, not my will, but yours be done. That's how you get aligned with true north. You don't say where north is. You simply look at where it is and say, that's where I'll go. Not my will, but yours be done. What area of your life do you need to say that in? Musicians, y'all come on. There they are. We're going to pray. And I want to challenge you today. Some of you may need to make that statement over your life for the first time. You may need to just say to Jesus, like I did one day, and like all of us at some point have had to come to this point if we know Christ, of saying, I'm headed in a direction and I'm going back to some bad places again and again and again that I don't want to go. God, keep me out of that park. I need to get to the destination. Lord, over my life, not my will, but thine be done. Some of you may need to speak that over your relationships. Maybe you're married and your marriage is a struggle and you've just been trying to control it. You've been trying to fix it. What you need to do is surrender that to God and say, God, not my will, but thine be done. Some of it may be your finances. You're trying to control your money and control it and make sure everything works. And you just need to surrender that to God, put Him first and say, God, not my will, but thine be done. I don't know what the area is in your life, but at some place, you may need to say that over your life. Or you may be a Christian who's hanging on to one of those areas and you just need to come to Him and say, it's not what I want, Lord. It's you. It's what you want to do in and through me. I was challenged with this recently. Is Jesus just a part of your life? It's possible. And we have this culture, I think, in the church in the United States that we kind of go about our lives and go about our business and kind of check in with God once in a while. Anybody know what I'm talking about? We kind of just show up, and please don't get me wrong. I don't want to preach to, you're here this morning, and I'm so glad you are. But sometimes it's possible to fall into a life where we just come in on Sunday and say, okay, God, I've checked that box. I've checked in. God, I gave an offering. God, I did something to help somebody. I just checked in. It's possible to make Jesus a part of your life. But if you look at the life of the Apostle Paul, Jesus wasn't a part of his life. Jesus was the point of his life. He lived for Jesus. He said, I've got all these things. I've got education. I've got fame. I've got standing socially. He had all this in his life, and he said, I counted them all as lost so I could win Him. I feel like God's calling you this morning, calling us all to make Jesus the point of our lives, not just a part. Not my will, but thine be done. Would you bow with me this morning? Jesus, we love you and thank you for today.